Alright folks, welcome to the Besides the Norm podcast. My name is Scuba and we have Craig sitting here.
What's that?
Young monk, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic.
We do that every time. We're going to be doing something different today, something Craig knows a lot more about than I do, and as we've spoken about this before, well, in a political sense, you know a lot more.
I know more than you about politics.
Yeah, and we're going to pass on to Craig, so are you ready?
Yeah, so today we're doing a debate on whether we should stay in the EU or not. Joining us we've got Bill Mair and Kay Morrison, who I'll give a chance to introduce herself in a minute.
Great.
Basically, the rules of this debate are going to be... We'll give you a few minutes at the beginning to sort of give a general argument for what you want to do in the EU, or not in the EU, as the case may be. And then you'll get a few minutes each to reply, and then as you bring up topics, you'll probably carry on the conversation yourself. But if the conversation dies down a wee bit, we've got some topics that we could bring up, if need be. Probably won't need them because Bill likes speaking. So we should be...
And we've discovered that Councillor Morrison
We've
can talk
discovered
about.
that you could both. You've got part, right? So we can pretty much start off now. We're fine. So if you want to introduce yourself first, Kay, we'll go ladies first.
Man. Ladies first.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting that. Ladies first, that's very, very polite in a gallant kind of way.
Thank you very much.
I am indeed Kay Morrison, and I am a councillor. I'm Fife's Deputy Provost. I'm a candidate in the forthcoming election. Quite a number of things, it would seem. And I have, like just about everybody I would have thought in Scotland, in the United Kingdom as a whole, been weighing up the pros and cons when it comes to staying in or getting out of the European Union. And it seems to me that the pros for staying in outweigh the cons. Scotland in particular has benefited enormously from being in the European Union in terms of jobs, exports. But we collectively, because I happen to believe, because I'm Labour, I happen to believe that working together, we can achieve far more for one another. And as a trade unionist, I believe that united, we are much, much stronger. I'm not claiming the European Union is perfect by any means, and you probably wouldn't expect me to say that.
We've got a couple of questions on that.
Yeah, well, okay, that's good. I'm looking forward to those. Will this do for this bit?
Bill, you got that there. Bill, if you want to... this may be considerably longer.
No, well, I'll try to be fair and talk for more or less the amount of time that Kay spoke for. Hi guys, my name is Bill Mair. I'm the Solidarity candidate for Mid-Scotland and Fife in the election on May the 5th. Now, Solidarity has a very clear, unambiguous position that we think we should leave the European Union. We think the European Union is a boss's club. It's set up to favour big business, it's set up to favour the billionaires, and it's anti-working class. Solidarity, throughout the whole of Solidarity, admittedly we're a small party, but we're completely united on this. I know that there are voices within the Labour Party, there's a Labour Leave contingent that politicians in the Labour want to come out, but I believe the majority position of your party, Kay, is that you want to stay in. I can sum up in 5 reasons why we believe in Lexit, which is the left exit. And when I say Lexit, I distinguish our reasons for wanting to leave the European Union from those of people like UKIP and the far right. The far right and UKIP want to come out of Europe because they want to stem immigration. They think the free movement of people is a bad thing. Within Solidarity, we would actually open our borders unconditionally. We don't believe in borders, and we would let refugees in, we would let people who want to move into our country in. We have absolutely no interest whatsoever in stemming migrations. That's a key difference between us, UKIP, and the Grassroots Out campaign.
Beep, beep.
We're not at all... sorry, Kay. We're not in any way linked to this. Oh, sorry, is that my timer? Was that what the beat was? It was too subtle for me. Right, guys, I'm going to honour my commitment. 5 reasons. Fortress Europe, the idea of Europe pushing migrants back into the sea is disgusting. The crushing of Greece when they elected a socialist government, the prohibition of nationalisation that comes as part of being a member of the European Union, TTIP and CETA, and I'll talk about TTIP and CETA a wee bit later on, and finally, Europe actually gives favoured trading status to Israel, and Israel is a rogue, pariah, murderous state Hamza Yusuf said we should ban all arms sales to Israel. Alex Salmond said we should never have normal relations with such a country because of their activities. So these are the 5 reasons, key reasons, why we think we should leave Europe.
Okay.
Could I
You got something
interject at this point?
Just anytime somebody pauses, you can just jump in.
Okay, right, that's good, thank you. I'll make a point of not using the same inflammatory language. I'll try to be measured and considered in the statements that I make today and any other day, in fact. For me, the overriding benefit of being in the European Union, however imperfect that organisation, that conglomerate of countries may be, is the lasting peace in Europe. And I am also convinced that many of the residents in other European countries see it in exactly the same way. And lots of those people would acknowledge that there are things about the European Union that worry them, that seriously worry them. TTIP is one, and that's one, obviously, that I'm really concerned about, and it's one that I think that we should work together, that we should unite on to ensure that that doesn't happen in the form that it appears to be taking right now. The European Union has achieved quite a number of benefits, not just for the European members, but for other countries in the world. Its international role has been quite marked. It has brought water, for example, to millions of people. It has ensured that primary school education is available, accessible to something like 10 million people. So that other role that we don't talk enough about, that international role, which means that all of the countries who are members of the European Union are working together to help others elsewhere in the world who are maybe a bit more disadvantaged than we are right here in Kennaway, is, I think, worthy of note, and it's one that we can't afford to lose. But the jobs that I mentioned in Scotland that come as a direct result of EU trading amount to something like, well, it's well over 100,000 jobs. And the amount of exporting that we do in Scotland at the moment, I think, is around about £12 billion. And well, okay, I accept that that's not going to cover the £15 billion of deficit that the SNP government has managed to rack up. It is still extremely useful to the lives of people here in Scotland. And for all of those reasons, I am not claiming that the European Union is a model of perfection or is it exactly how I would like it to be right now. And I'm not suggesting that we should stop renegotiating our role in that organisation. I still feel that the pros outnumber the cons. It's going to be a difficult decision. I know that. For a lot of people, they don't know where to start with this.
How heavily would you consider the pros to outweigh the cons? Do the pros just outweigh the cons, or are cons significantly lower?
For me, the cons are significantly lower.
Yeah.
But maybe that has something to do with my experience in my current job. I quite often meet up with people from other countries. For example, you'll know that there are lots of towns, some of them quite small, in Fife that are twinned with towns in other European countries, and they come about as a result of this EU partnership. And people in each of the communities benefit, not just because they get to know how one another's cultures work, but because they feel, and many of those people are passionately committed to that particular project, that twinning relationship, because they know that it's really about soft diplomacy. It's maintaining the peace that we have in Europe. Hard won, I would suggest, but one that I believe, and maybe that has something to do with my background, I don't know, I think that we need to defend and we need to hang on to.
I noticed you talking there about town twinning, Kay, and I myself have been out to Logroño several times. Logroño's twinned. Well, nowadays towns aren't twinned with towns. Nowadays towns are twinned with 5 councils. So Logroño's in northern Spain.
No, that's
Used to
not
be
correct.
Twinned. Okay,
Not
but
correct.
anyway, it's twinned with northern. It's twinned. It used to be twinned with Dunfermline.
It still is.
Okay. But just let me.
We're
me
not
get my point
rewriting
across.
history here.
Let me put my point across. So I've been out to Logroño a few times, but last year I was out in Nablus. Nablus is a town in the west bank of Palestine that's twinned with Dundee. I was actually out there in October last year when the riots were taking place in the delegation visit. And I don't want to divert the topic of this conversation. The point being that you can have twin towns with towns outside the European Union, and the reason I mentioned Nablus was just to give a concrete example. You mentioned as well, Kay, and you're absolutely right about the lasting peace. So the idea of the European Union came out of after the Second World War, because obviously the Second World War, by its very name, it had 2 of them, and we wanted peace within Europe. So this idea of having a trading bloc so that Germany, France, Britain and other nations would all be at peace with one another, a fantastic idea, and one that I support wholeheartedly. Along with the European Union, also one of the pros that I am sure that I agree with Kay on is the free movement of people. Free movement of people, fantastic idea. I've said, we're a socialist party, we're an internationalist party, we don't believe in borders anyway. So our ultimate goal in an ideal world is we tear down all the borders between countries. But the problem is that a lot of the pros, a lot of the advantages that are put forward about Europe, they're absolutely true, but they're out of date. It's a wee bit like after Christmas, you've got your turkey or your chicken or whatever it is you've roasted for your Christmas dinner, and then the next day you have some sandwiches with it, or maybe the next day after you make a stew with it, and the day after that you make a soup with it. Eventually that big turkey or that big chicken you've got in the fridge goes off, it goes bad, it doesn't last forever, and that's what's happened with Europe. I admit it started off as a very good idea, and I do agree with you on the ideals that you've articulated about solidarity across Europe. Unfortunately, things like TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade International Partnership, which are being negotiated right now by unelected officials in the European Commission and America, mean basically, and it's highly secretive, so there's only little snippets that anyone even knows about this, but one of the things we know is that it will give corporations, American corporations, power over governments. That corporations in America can sue European governments. Now that goes right to the heart of democracy. That's the most undemocratic thing you could possibly think of. I don't know what your thoughts are on TTIP and CETA. It's a Canadian cousin, Kay?
Well, I have already mentioned TTIP.
Did you?
Yes, I almost have the impression, Billy, that you're not listening to me.
Of course I'm listening.
But maybe it's important to mention at this point, I'm not as easily defeated as you are, possibly, Bill. I haven't given up on TTIP turning out to be better than we think it might at the moment. Some of us have been quite heavily involved in campaigning against TTIP for, I don't know, about a year, at least a year. I think quite a number of us locally have been campaigning because we have been worried, just as worried as you, maybe more worried actually, Bill, because we've been active.
I've been active with it, Kay. Now you did see me, you saw me and a lot of my comments with the People's Assembly and Women Against Austerity. Didn't you come and pose with us outside Five House for your photograph? You know that I've been active in this. Anyway, carry on, Kay, I don't want to interrupt you.
I think you're maybe thinking of another occasion, Bill.
Okay.
Because I think, you have appeared in quite a number of campaigns. You name the campaign, Bill Mair is there with
Super.
a different banner. Doesn't matter what it is, he's there with a banner. Anyway,
that's what politicians
so-
should be, standing up for what's right.
all right, well, as the only politician in the room, you're right, and I
see.
do.
Okay. Okay, what's your point?
But, thanks, Bill.
I would like just
Look, he's interrupting me
If
now,
we-
guys. He's interrupting me now.
finish,
No,
finish,
we'll
come
not.
back.
We won't allow that, Bill.
We won't allow. Okay.
No, we won't allow
interruptions.
that. No.
Okay. Well, let's honour that amongst ourselves.
To rewind to one of the points that you made was a reflection on something I'd been talking about, which is about twinning. We still have town twinning and community twinning. It's exactly as it was previously, and I suppose in some areas has probably been strengthened. And some of our German twin towns and communities are still passionately committed and become quite emotional, as you might imagine, because they have become involved in this relationship. In some cases, it's been going on for years and years, about 50 years, or it must be more actually, since, as you said, it started in the wake of the Second World War, and because of that determination to never let that happen again. But those twinning operations, visits, partnerships, relationships are in general funded both by local communities, to some extent by Fife Council, but as you know, we're running out of money here in Fife, and to quite a large extent by European funding, because the rest of Europe still believes in all of that. So I would like to see all of that continue. I use the term soft diplomacy, and I use that because those initiatives are working at community level, and that's where they're effective. Because the people who are actually involved, who are working on projects together, and quite often there will be people here in Fife working with local people to, maybe it could be a gardening project or something to do with catering. It can be all kinds of things that people are interested in. That is in working together on. So I want to see all of that continue, and I'm not at all convinced that if our involvement in the European Union were to cease, that would happen. I think it would gradually over time dwindle and fall away. So in spite of what I said about there being shortcomings, about the necessity for us to work within the European Union, within that partnership, to make it better, I don't believe, as Bill was saying, that it's like a turkey or something. Incidentally, I'm vegetarian, so that image is never going to work for me. So I think that if you're involved in something that you happen to believe in, that works for the partners and has the benefits that I've been talking about, then you need to put a bit of effort in to ensure that it's fit for purpose, that it's fit for the 21st century, and therefore that it's healthy, that it's up and running and ready for the next change, because there will be other changes.
So you said that you wanted to keep this going because you think if we left that people would lose interest and it would start losing fun. Is that because we leave though, or do you think it's possible that it could still keep going?
I think it would be much more difficult if we leave the European Union, because we would begin to lose, we're bound to begin to lose those close relationships, those partnerships. And you will have seen and heard people in other European countries telling us that they want us to stay part of that union, to stay united, because they are convinced of the benefits, not just about money. And I know I mentioned money earlier, about jobs for Scotland and so on, and all of that is absolutely important, of course it is. But it's these less tangible benefits that I think would be put in jeopardy. The piece that I referred to. And I think that if we left, it would worry a lot of our European partners. And probably some of them wouldn't even be all that sure why they're so worried. But it's because of those historical factors. But it is going to require work. And I mean on the part of this country, the United Kingdom, and our other European partner countries, because you will probably have noticed that a few of them, not a lot admittedly, are now saying, yeah, the European Union does need to be reformed. It's not necessarily fit for the 21st century. It's not necessarily delivering what we wanted to do now, right now, at this point in time. We need to change it. It needs to have a fresh look taken, and it needs, well, it's going to take quite a lot of work. But it needs to be changed, I believe. But to stay, maybe in slightly different form.
All right, so, I mean, basically, Kay's spoken a lot here about town twinning, and I think probably town twinning is a good thing, but it's probably not the most important thing we need to be talking about today. And also, as I mentioned, you can have town twinning without being in Europe, and I gave a concrete example. So I don't think I need to dwell any more on that. I agree with Kay that town twinning is a good idea for all the reasons, but I don't think coming out of Europe is going to jeopardise it. What I would like to talk or ask Kay about and talk about is nationalisation. Now, excuse me. Back in 2006, Tommy Sheridan, when he was an MSP, put a bill to the Scottish Parliament proposing the nationalisation of Scottish railways, or railways in Scotland. The bill went through various procedures, and eventually, by the time it had ground through the information centre at the Scottish Parliament, it was discovered that actually that would break European law, and we can't do that. We can't nationalise industries. And in fact, there's pressure on any industry which is already nationalised in any country within Europe to privatise. There is a commitment in the Copenhagen Treaty to pursue free market economics and a free market economy, which means basically everything should be privatised. Now, I know that historically and traditionally the Labour Party, like Solidarity, are strong on nationalisation. I don't know what the current position is now, and I shan't talk for Kay on that. I can say that Solidarity believes that all the essentials of life should be provided by the state, so your utilities, your gas, your electric, railways. We also happen to believe in a nationalised pharmaceutical industry that will sit alongside the existing state NHS. The problem is, one of the fundamental problems is, and this, I'm not sure this is something that can be negotiated away with Europe, because it's a mainstay of it's one of the spinal agreements of being in Europe. You can't have nationalised industries, and you certainly cannot renationalise anything. So to us, that's a big stumbling block. We were told, I'm old enough to remember when we used to have British Rail, and then it all started getting privatised, and we were told that the private sector is leaner and more efficient and better than the state sector, and we're going to privatise the rail industry, and it's all going to be a golden future, and we'll be travelling everywhere for pennies, and it's going to be clean and shiny, and what a great future we've got. The reality is that we're still pouring millions and millions into the railway network to keep it subsidised, but people are sucking money out of it in profits. These private companies are sucking money out of it in profits. Mile for mile, we pay more to travel on our railways than pretty much anywhere I can think of because of our privatised railways, and those nationalised railways that still exist in Europe are beating us hands down in terms of performance. So to me, that's a real concrete reason, that's a real concrete bone to chew on that I'd like to talk about. I'd like to hand over to Kay if you've got anything to say on that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic actually, Bill, and I'm really glad that you mentioned it. I am also a member of the Cooperative Party, which works closely with the Labour Party because we have shared aims. And you're right, it is nationalisation is one, or has been, one of the central tenets of the Co-op Party, but actually I'm simplifying things. It's really not just about nationalisation, it's about mutualisations. It's about looking at various cooperative models, not just one. And while it's certainly the case that we have an uphill rail journey on this particular topic because there have been so many obstacles put in our path, it's something we are still working towards. In several other European countries, the rail service, the public transport service, in fact, is, I believe, better than here in Scotland. It is. Yeah. And probably that's to do with ownership, the way it's organised. But some of those other European countries also have higher taxation levels than we have here in Scotland. So we would have to be realistic about that as well. You're probably aware, Bill, that one of the proposals that the Labour Party has made over last months, actually, but the media has become interested in the last few weeks, is to do with tax. That is taxing those at the top who earn, say, around about 150,000 to ensure that those people pay a bit more. So in other words, if you're serious about wanting to change, whether it's transport services or anything else in a country, you have to be able to find the money. You have to be upfront and honest about that, about why you're doing it and how you're going to do it. Recently, when Nicola Sturgeon, I think that was yesterday, the day before, was asked, how are you going to deal with the deficit in Scotland, which at the moment is 15 billion. So, proportionately, that is something like double the UK's, and it's more than any other country in the European Union. Greece, I think, was less, and they had to suffer, as you mentioned earlier, as a country. So when she was asked, how are you going to deal with that? How will Scotland actually pay that off? She wouldn't answer. She just kept saying, well, like any other country, we have a deficit. Most countries do have a deficit, and we'll deal with that. But she wouldn't say how. what sort of measures would be put in place. So I suppose what I'm arguing for is a more mature, more grown-up approach to running the country, to politics, and more honest as well.
How would the EU cause this? How would the EU help to make it more mature?
Well, couldn't we learn? Well, we could be on our own a bit more mature, and that would mean that our role in the European Union would be a more fulfilling, more satisfying one, I would have thought. But, as Bill was saying, we can learn from other countries, from the way that they do things, and how they do them. If they do some things better than we think they're being done here, but that, rail travel would just be one of those, then we have to look at the mechanism by which they achieve that, and maybe consider changing the way we achieve those aims too. So it's not just a matter of saying we would like that, let's have it. We have to think about how we get there, because there'll be other decisions to be made, not just I want £500 for Christmas. Where's it going to come from exactly? That £500 would have to come from somewhere, vegetarian or otherwise.
Nationalisation versus private industries. I've got a metaphor or a simile that I like to use when I think about nationalised industries. So if you think of a car, you've got your radiator and you put your coolant in and so forth. In theory, when you put your coolant in your car and the radiator, the coolant flows around the engine, it goes into the expansion tank and so forth and so forth. In theory, you can drive your car for weeks, months, years and never ever have to top it up because that coolant isn't going anywhere. It's not like fuel that you put in and it gets burnt up and goes away. It just circulates all the way around. A nationalised industry is like that image I've just given. You pump resources into it and those resources never leave. So, for example, when we had British Rail, the state would pay for the infrastructure, the rails, the trains, the running stock, all that sort of stuff, and pay the staff. Any surplus that British Rail made was then pumped back into the British economy at that time. We're looking forward to an independent Scotland, but the British economy, that money was never siphoned out. That money never went out into the pockets of fat cat investors or out in dividends. When you look at a private industry, it's impossible for a privatised industry, like a privatised rail industry, seeing as I'm on that track. See what I did there? A privatised rail industry, it's impossible for a privatised rail industry to run as efficiently as a nationalised industry. Why? Because instead of that money just circulating around and benefiting everyone within that system, somebody's coming along and siphoning out that money every single year in profits. This idea of profits, this idea that everything has to make a profit. This is a free market economy that I was talking about earlier, that the European Union is established to promote. So Britain is obliged to pursue a free market economy. Britain is obliged to pursue private industry. But private industry involves people coming along and sucking out money, putting it in their pocket and walking away. So you've got, for example, not just rail, you've got the deregulated bus services. You've got Brian Souter up the road there, Anne Gloag, his sister, who lives in a big castle in Perth, not so far away from here, running these transport services for private profit and living in a big, enormous castle worth goodness knows how many hundreds of thousands, or probably millions. It's so far out of my experience, I don't know. That money can never benefit the state because it is sucked out of the system in profit. The Labour Party traditionally, when I was a boy, used to stand for nationalised industry. It was all very simple. The Conservatives were for privatisation. The Labour Party was for nationalisation. Kay talks about a more grown-up politics. I see this, it's not more grown-up, it's sophistry. And yes, my point of view is simpler. It's more black and white. My point of view and my party's point of view is putting people before profit. Private enterprise, the free market economy, is putting profit before people. It's making profit more important than people. So that's our stance on nationalisation, and the hard fact is that the European Union is not just against nationalisation, it's not just against state industry, it actually prohibits it. Kay mentioned me being out in Greece last year. Two things happened when I was out in Greece last year. I was in Kos.
No, I didn't mention you were being out in Greece.
I mentioned it, you repeated it. I was in Greece.
No, I never said anything about your being in Greece.
Okay, fine, Kay. Anyway, point is, guys, Listeners, I was in Kos last year with my wife, and we spent a couple of weeks of our summer holiday working with refugees, mainly from Syria, sometimes from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh. But we're working with the refugees who are arriving on the island of Kos. Two things happened when I was there. One thing was working with the refugees. The other thing that happened was they had the referendum. And this was a Greek referendum whether or not to accept the terms of Europe and their economy, because Greece elected a socialist government. Europe cracked down and tried to crush the socialist government, impose crippling financial terms on Greece, and the Greek government put it to the Greek people in a referendum, and a democratic system say, look, do we accept this or don't we? And they voted, no, we don't accept the terms of Europe. But Greece was crushed. It was humiliated in the aftermath of that vote. It was punished by Europe for that vote. And it was blackmailed, essentially. All the Greek people I spoke to out there, they were blackmailed. They would be expelled from the euro if they didn't agree to all these terms at Europe. And now, what you've got in Greece is rampant unemployment. You've got riots in the streets of Athens. You've got widespread discontent. When we look at what the European Union has done to the country of Greece in the terms of working class solidarity, we in Solidarity say we cannot be part of an organisation that has humiliated and crushed our comrades in Greece in such a way. We can't be part of that. And by remaining part of the European Union, we're complicit with it. What you don't prevent, you promote. So, 2 points I brought up there. The refugees coming into Kos, and I mentioned earlier Fortress Europe, and I keep reading more and more every day. It's getting more and more frightening. I work with Refuge 5, an organisation that sends volunteers out to Kos. I've got 2 out there at the moment, and 2 just come back. And we're reading and we're seeing that at the moment these people are arriving mainly from Syria, but from other countries. They're essentially being kettled. In Greece, they're being kettled. They can't get out of the country. All the other countries are closing their borders to these refugees. So while on the one hand you've got this fantastic thing of the free movement of people within Europe, yeah, but only if you're European. Only if you're European. So within a family unit, within a house, is another metaphor. Within a house you might have a family who's all very, very nice to each other. Mum's nice to the dad, dad's nice to the kids nice to the cat doesn't even eat the pet mouse. Everybody's fine to each other within that house, but outside that house, anyone from outside that house, they're cruel to them. And that's the European Union. We're all fine. I can travel freely across Europe, unless I want to go from Greece to Macedonia, I suppose. I can travel freely across Europe because I'm a European. I've got my European passport. But if I'm in desperate need to flee the bombs that are dropping on my house in Syria, the bombs that are made in Glenrothes, just a few miles from my house, just a few miles from Fife House headquarters, and not a few yards from headquarters of Fife Council, if I want to flee those bombs and come to Europe for a safe haven, I can't. Again, socialism is internationalism. We would open our borders and let people in, and we cannot in conscience support a European Union that closes its borders to refugees fleeing in terror from bombs.
I suppose I would observe it's fairly obvious the European Union is not the finished article, and that the behaviour of some of the countries towards refugees has been quite shocking.
So this would be a point where this would be one of the cons, one of the few cons that you consider in the EU.
Yes and no. I just don't see it in quite the same straightforward black and white, as Bill said, fashion as he does. And even if we go back to what we were talking about earlier, the twinning business, some of at least one of those twinnies, they're really communities now rather than towns that twin, has been put in jeopardy because of the refugee situation. I'm not going to name any names or even give the names of the places because I don't want to implicate anybody involved in this, and I think that I know it is a very sensitive issue. People here had felt that it was the wrong time to have people from that particular country visit here because they were very, very concerned about the treatment of refugees in that country. And those who were going to visit here defended their behaviour, sent us photographs of refugees behaving badly, in inverted commas. That's how they saw it. But we know that human behaviour isn't quite that straightforward, isn't that black and white. But we also know that Europe, it's not just Europe, it's an international situation, has to learn how to deal with refugees in a humane fashion, recognising them as human beings, just like the rest of us. Because if you or I were in that situation where we knew that we were in danger, that maybe members of our family had already been killed, and we are living in a state of fear every day. It's impossible for us to carry out the usual sort of things that people do, go out to the local shop. It's just not possible to do that, knowing that we would be safe. Then eventually we would reach the point at which we would have to consider whether leaving our country is the best thing to do, and we would do it reluctantly and probably in the hope that eventually, when some sort of peace descends upon our country, we would be able to return. So it is absolutely essential, it is crucial for the rest of us to welcome those people, to give them safe haven, and to make them feel that actually they are welcome. And we have been doing that in Fife. Bill has referred to some of the work that's going on, and I know that people from Fife have gone out, and are working with refugees, and the number of refugees is increasing colossally day by day, because there are more and more people who are frightened. Sometimes the term economic migrants is used in a way that's intended to trivialise or dismiss. People do not leave their home, their town, their country lightly. They don't run off with virtually nothing in their pockets just for the laugh, just because it's a bit of fun. It'd be good crack to go to some other place and to risk your life in maybe a boat of some kind, knowing that there's a possibility that it could capsize, and to see members of your family dying in front of you. All of this has to be taken absolutely seriously. We have to find a way of actually coping with it, of supporting people. I believe it means putting in more resources for all of the countries involved, including this one. We have accepted some refugees, but we could do far more. This country, relatively speaking, is still one of the wealthier ones in the world. And even in spite of what I was saying earlier about the deficit, we have the capacity here to accept more people and to give them a roof, to give them safety, relative safety, and give them what they need, a bit of support, so that they have a life here and maybe even a job here, knowing that some of those people will stay here, maybe for the rest of their lives. And that's okay too.
Okay, that's great. I think we may have a point of agreement here. I was going to ask you, you were talking about photographs of refugees behaving badly, and I thought maybe I should get into that and a bit of victim blaming going on there. But I thought maybe we'll just stick to the substantive point there. You appear to be agreeing with me that we should be giving shelter and safety to these refugees who are fleeing in terror. Unlike you, I don't really differentiate between what you would call an economic migrant, and I know there's a difference in European law between an economic migrant and a refugee. So an economic migrant is fleeing poverty, and a refugee is fleeing
I'm going to have to stop you there. That's not what I said. You're misrepresenting what I said, Bill, for your own purposes, and that's not admirable.
What was it that you said?
I said the following. Sometimes people are described, or the term is used, economic migrant, to trivialise, to belittle. And then I went on to describe what the circumstances usually are for people who leave their own country. And now you're telling me that I am describing these people as economic migrants. That's not what I said at all.
I'm not launching a person like that. No, it's okay. It's fair enough.
You've got to listen to what I'm actually saying.
Well, I'm not sure I do. But anyway, I think the guys that's in the podcast can listen. I'm not launching a personal attack on UK. I'm actually trying to say that I think we've reached, and amongst all the things we've spoken about, we've reached a point of agreement.
Well, if you say it must be solved.
I went off on a sidetrack there about... I think we've reached a point of agreement. I'm going to go on a sidetrack. My sidetrack is this, nothing to do with Kay. This is to do with European law and what some people say, not Kay Morrison. Now, some people, or many people, may say that there's a difference between economic migrants and refugees, and they say economic migrants are fleeing poverty, refugees are fleeing persecution or warfare. What I say, and what my party says, is we don't recognise that distinction, because basically poverty is caused essentially across the world by Western capitalism. The vast majority of the conflicts and wars across the world are caused by Western intervention. So therefore, the way we see it as socialists is that a man or a woman or a person fleeing from Pakistan or Bangladesh is fleeing the poverty which is inflicted by Western capitalism. They're locked out of the bosses club of Europe. They can't trade in the same way that Britain can trade with France, for example. So we're complicit in their poverty. A person fleeing from Syria, well, it's very easy to see the link between us and Syria, because I mentioned, that we make components for the bombs that are dropped on them up the road there in Glenrothes. That's the sidetrack. Here's my main point. Kay, you appear to be very sympathetic, like I am, towards these people who are coming here from Syria and other refugees. You mentioned that we're only accepting a small number. I agree. In Fife, we're accepting 140 Syrian refugees over 5 years. Fife as a population is something like 369,000. There's masses of empty space in Fife. You compare what we're doing in Britain with Lebanon. Lebanon has 2 million Syrian refugees, and Lebanon is about 8 times smaller than the UK. It's a bit bigger than Scotland, but not much. I think we agree on that, and that's great. So then, Kay, if we agree on that, if I've got that bit right, that we agree that we should be showing more compassion, welcoming more refugees in, how do you reconcile then that with the European Commission, the European Union's position on refugees? Because they're being very unhelpful, and we're seeing refugees kettled at Macedonia and other bottleneck points, as I mentioned earlier.
Well, I thought I had already mentioned that I don't think we're doing enough, that this country and all the other European countries should be doing more. I don't really want to keep saying the same things. It's very boring listening to that.
Sorry, to clarify my point is basically, this is one of the reasons why I and my party want to come out of Europe, because we close our borders to refugees fleeing and trying to come to us to safety. Your point of view is that you're pro-Europe, and so I'm saying to you, well, look, how do you reconcile that? Because Europe is trying to keep migrants out and refugees out. You personally want to see us accepting more refugees. So how do you reconcile that with your support for Europe? That was my question.
I don't accept your description, which is, as seems to be the case frequently during this conversation, a simpler one than the way that I see it. I don't believe that Europe is keeping refugees out. I don't think Europe is doing enough. I don't think the United Kingdom is doing enough. I don't think Scotland is doing enough. We could certainly welcome far, far more. And the Labour Party is also a socialist party. We are an international party, and that's how we see the world. We see our place in the world. We should be playing our part. At the moment, I think this country isn't playing its part to the full. And really, I would say that some older generations are now disappointed in what we're doing or not doing, because this country used to act on this, that welcomed people from other countries and took pride in the number of nationalities that we have in our country. And go to any of our cities, any of our large cities, and you will find that there's a whole mix of nationalities, and that those add to the richness of the culture in this country and in that particular city or town, and bring different views, different attitudes, and a diversity that I think enriches everybody's lives, not just those who are settling here, but those who are helping them to do that. And so I think we're missing out on an opportunity by being a bit mean-spirited about all of this. So,
right. So to clarify both points, you say you want to leave the EU because the EU is holding back on accepting refugees.
That is one of our main reasons. Yeah.
You say that the EU could do more to help refugees. So you don't think leaving would help that, and you think the only way to help that is by leaving. Is there a possibility that by staying in the EU you could negotiate better terms for refugees?
I think given the direction of travel, I mean, when I spoke about this turkey, and I'm sorry I've offended Kay, who's a vegetarian, when I spoke about food going bad in the fridge, it was this
Did I
idea...
seem offended?
People
It
talk...
was funny.
Okay. People talk about the good old days of Europe and talk about the reasons it was set up, and I don't disagree. I remember when I was a young lad, or younger than I am now, they were talking about the European Union, or what is it? They used to talk about the common market it was, and then the European community, and now it's the European Union, the television adverts back in the day, and I thought, this is great. I went off and did a degree in languages because I thought, this many years ago, because I was convinced with the hype of this golden future that we had ahead of us, and the way that Europe was described back in the day was fantastic. I supported it. I wasn't particularly politically aware back in those days, but I supported it. Nowadays, I don't support it because of the way that it's moved, because of how it's changed and the direction it's going in. How would being out of Europe, from my party's point of view, we want two things. We want to be both out of Europe, and as you know, we're a pro-independence party. We want to be out of the United Kingdom. We want to be an independent socialist republic of Scotland. And so for us, that's the goal. And the Socialist Republic would have our borders open, as many people as want to come in here. We wouldn't differentiate at the border on the colour of a person's passport or indeed the colour of a person's skin. So that's the way that we would work it. We see all people as equal, and we see the value of people coming into this country. A vast percentage of Scotland is open space. We have massive amounts of room. We also have a crushing need in this country to rebuild as many council houses as we can as a result of Thatcher's policy of right to buy, where she sold off all the council houses but failed to rebuild any. So if you think, if we've got thousands of people and we're told we're going to be swamped by thousands of migrants and refugees, well, that's fantastic. Hopefully among these migrants and refugees will be people with the skills that will come to help us build these houses. We'll have apprenticeships. We'll have a massive programme of building houses across the country, both to house the people in Scotland who are on incredibly long waiting lists at this time, and to house incomers, welcome people coming into this country. So it's a no-brainer. Independent Socialist Republic of Scotland with the borders open to welcome people from wherever they may come.
Right. So quickly, go on. You said you've got 10 minutes. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So negotiations that Cameron's got. What's your thoughts on them? Quickly. Do you know what the negotiations are?
I'm not clear about the detail. I don't think very many people are. I don't think he came back with very much, to be absolutely honest.
No.
But you've got to let me deal with a couple of points that Bill made.
Okay.
One is about houses, building houses. So he will be delighted to know that Fife Labour has been building hundreds of houses over the last nearly 4 years, right here in Fife. And by next year, we'll have built well over 2,700 houses. And we want to build more because we know about the numbers on the waiting lists. So in other words, we're not just talking about it, we're actually doing it, we're delivering. And something I keep being struck by is the description of what seems to be a passive, helpless Scotland, helpless United Kingdom, which is at the mercy of this monolithic, anonymous, faceless, colossus, merciless organisation called the European Union, as if we have no say in it, as if it's always going to be that way and we have no real role in reforming it. Whereas you will have gathered that I'm a bit more optimistic about that, because I think we need to get in there. We need to play our full part as the United Kingdom in genuinely reforming it. And we now know that there are other countries who want exactly the same thing. So maybe David Cameron's negotiations didn't look terribly impressive, but they've had one big positive result, and that is that other European Union countries want it to change as well. So I think we should take advantage of that dynamic, that energy, that willingness to change the whole structure. Now, get in there.
I think you could also argue from this, though, that the EU is very, very limited on how much they want to change.
But we are the EU.
Yeah, I know, but if that was the case, then he would have got a better deal.
Well, we're one of 20
we haven't.
countries.
It hasn't stopped. It has not stopped. Other countries which weren't involved in negotiations until this point are now saying, yes, we want changes to happen too. So we've got a bit of momentum going now. I think we need to take advantage of that. Maybe that sounds a bit exploitative.
So,
I don't
so
know.
you think it's a bit
but we
like
should.
sort of getting a crack in the door and now
Yes,
you can pull it open?
definitely. We
Right.
need to work on that.
Any final...
Well, I think Kay's answered the question for me. I think the question that you put was, how do you think David Cameron has done in his negotiations with Europe? I think we all agree here that Cameron hasn't really achieved anything of any substance whatsoever, which illustrates my point. We're only one voice of 28 countries in Europe. I don't think we have any clout in Europe. On the one hand, it is true, we are part of the club of Europe, so therefore we are the club, but we're only one of 28. And I think our days in the European Union are done. I've got a very simple black and white. I don't accept this whole idea about politics is much more subtle than we understand, and people like me don't understand it. I think it's an insult. The reasons that I have given for coming out of Europe remain: Fortress Europe, the crushing of Greece, prohibition of nationalisation, TTIP, and favoured trading status of Israel. There are other reasons, and I'm sure if we had time we could have covered them. But those 5 key reasons remain for me fundamental reasons why we need to get out of the club, the bosses' club of Europe.
So, I guess that's the end of the debate. If we're sort of running out of time here, both different parties. You've got some slight disagreements.
Mhm.
I reckon if you want to go further than that, but if you want to give a quick shout and say why people should vote for you in the elections, and then Bill we'll make Bill go second because you have to go. So if you want to give a quick few minutes on why you should be voted for.
Right, so you're talking about the May
For
election,
the elections now.
not the referendum.
No.
Okay, right. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I want people to vote for me. I want people to vote for the Labour Party on the 5th of May, because I know that Labour in Fife has already delivered. Earlier I talked about houses that we've already built, because we know how desperate the situation is for many people, thousands of people on housing waiting lists, and we couldn't wait for the Scottish Government to sort it out. So we made a point of building those houses, social housing, in other words, houses for people to rent. And by next year, we will have built well over 2,700. In other words, we will have exceeded our target. But we also have prevented the privatisation of residential care homes, which the SNP had left as a possibility, because we believe that people want and have been asking for residential care that is in public hands. And the Labour Party obviously believes that we should deliver on that, not just talk about it, but actually do it. We have improved attainment, exam results in our schools. We have been bridging the gap, as it's called, ensuring that those young people who start off at a disadvantage don't end up at a disadvantage when they leave school, so that they're given a chance to take part in school activities, but also to achieve and to attain, to pass exams. So we have already bridged that gap, but in fact we're raising the bar for everybody. But we want to do more of that. We're building schools, we want to do more of that. And really, the only way that you can do more of the things that we believe in, whether it's social work, housing, education, health, is to get into power in Holyrood, in Edinburgh. So until Labour has a bigger say there, we can't change things here in the way that we want to. So vote Kay Morrison, vote Labour.
That's fine. If you have to go, we could cut here. And then
No,
we'll
it's
let
okay.
Bill-
I've got a few more minutes.
Oh, you got a few minutes?
Oh. Okay. Yeah, well, I would like you to vote for Solidarity on the 5th of May. Our party does not appear on the lilac ballot paper, the constituency ballot paper. We're only on the list, so you won't see my name. You'll see Solidarity, and probably will list our party as Solidarity Tommy Sheridan. I'd like to talk about this one of our policies, so I don't ramble on too long about why you should vote for Solidarity, why you should vote for me, Bill Mair, on the 5th of May. It's a Scottish service tax. Earlier on I mentioned Anne Gloag and her big castle up near Perth. The differential with the council tax at the moment is 3, which means the difference between a band A council tax and a band H, which is the highest you can get, is 3. I live in a wee 2-bedroom band A flat. Anne Gloag lives in a castle in Perthshire. Now, we're in different council areas, but there's very little difference between the council tax. Her income is thousands of times what my income is, but her council tax is only 3 times. So she only pays 3 times the tax I do, despite the fact she makes 1,000 times more money. The Scottish service tax does away with the council tax completely, replaces it with an income-based tax. And it was actually tabled as a private member's bill by Tommy Sheridan when he was an MSP in 2006, and it's been fully worked out, fully costed. I've updated the figures. The figures at that time said that if you made less than £10,000, you would pay nothing, exempt. That now is £14,000, you pay nothing. Between £14,000 and £42,000, you pay 4% of what is over 14. So if you make £15,000, you would pay 4% of £1,000, you pay £40. Now, I'm not going to blind everyone with figures. I've got them written down here, but I'm not going to get into them because really, I need to see figures. If someone just starts shouting at me, I can't follow them. Here's how the Scottish service tax works. It does away with council tax. It makes the poor richer. It makes the rich poorer. It means that most people would pay less. Pensioners would be completely exempt. Lower paid would be completely exempt, and on a minimum wage would be completely exempt. Most people would pay less. A few people would pay the same, and a very few people would pay more. But those people who pay more would pay so much more that it has been calculated, and it was calculated in 2006, we would raise £505 million extra for councils across Scotland. Today's figures, that's £735 million. Well, guess what? The shortage that all the councils across Scotland are facing is £350 million this year. The Scottish service tax is a fairer tax. It would more than double wipe out the shortfall that councils have got across Scotland. It liberates money down for people who are making less money, and it's a fairer tax, a redistributive tax, taking money quite literally from the rich and giving it to the poor. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I would like you to vote for Solidarity on the 5th of May on your peach ballot paper.
Right, well, thanks for joining us, Kay. Well,
cool.
It's a pleasure.
That was
Hopefully-
excellent. That was excellent.
hopefully speak to you again at some point.
That would be fine by me.
Right.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.